Breath of the Wild is my favorite game, and it has taken me a long time to realize why, but I think I finally understand why. It is the best game I have ever played, so spoilers ahead for a 4-year-old game. If you haven't already played it, you should. Alright, so I think the reason why I love Breath of the Wild so much came down to two key things. The game itself is about a dead world that, despite everything, is filled with hope. Breath of the Wild is the only game that I have ever played that has been able to capture that feeling of loss while also filling it with so much hope. Hope that the world can in fact get better. Hope that no matter how much everything went wrong, it can still work out in the end. And that is why I like this game so much. That message of hope in the face of loss is something that fills the game even from the opening cutscene. So I have spent a lot of time alone as a kid. As a matter of fact, I still spend a lot of time alone now. It's not that I don't like people, it's just that people don't seem to get me all that well. I was the type of kid that would go running through the woods seeking adventure, and for a while that was enough. But I realized what everyone must at some point. That you can't stay a child forever, and that someday you realize that the woods aren't as big as you thought they were. They are in fact nothing more than a small grove of trees, and everything just seems so less wonderful. But before we talk about me, let's talk about the story of Breath of the Wild as I see it. So, once again, this is your final spoiler warning. A prophecy was foretold, one that predicted the return of Calamity Ganon, so the king and queen of Hyrule began to make their preparations. But just as the king and queen's young daughter Zelda was going to start her training, the queen died. This left Princess Zelda without a mother, and more importantly to the kingdom, without her only teacher. But work progressed on preparing for the return of Calamity Ganon, with ancient guardians and ruins being found scattered across the entire kingdom. But the most significant of all of these ruins to be found was the 4 divine beasts, Vah Ruta, Vah Medoh, Vah Naboris, and Vah Rudania. These were 4 massive mountain-sized machines built for the purpose of destroying Ganon. Along with the 4 divine beasts was also found a shrine unlike the others, one that was thought to possess healing properties. As the research had started, a young knight had begun to rise among the ranks of the royal guard. As more and more people watched the young man, Link, worried about saying the wrong thing, was driven into a self-silence. The pressure on his shoulders only worsened when he pulled the legendary Master Sword, and suddenly he was no longer just the most accomplished knight in the kingdom, but he was expected to use that sword that would seal away the darkness and defeat Calamity Ganon. Yet still, the expectations on Link were made greater when he was assigned to protect his lord's daughter, the Princess of Hyrule. The princess was having difficulties of her own. Her father, her kingdom, and herself expected her to unlock the power of old, the sealing power of legend, but she could not. And now, having the chosen knight silently follow behind her, only highlighted her failures. 4 champions were chosen to pilot the divine beasts, and preparations to defeat Calamity Ganon were in their final stretches. But it still was not enough. The sealing power still had not presented itself to the princess, and so the day of Calamity dawned, and the 4 champions raced to their divine beasts, but no one expected what awaited them. One by one, the 4 champions of Hyrule were killed, and the divine beasts that they were controlling were lost to Ganon. And still, Zelda, Princess of Hyrule, had not unlocked her sealing power. The castle of Hyrule fell to Ganon as he seized control of the guardians that had been built to stop him. These guardians flowed forth. As Link and Zelda retreated, Link fought them, protecting his charge until he himself fell. Finally, Zelda stepped in front of certain death to prevent the death of Link, and in a burst of light, the guardians fell lifeless to the ground. With her sealing powers finally unlocked, she turned to face Ganon, and Link was put into the Shrine of Resurrection, for the next 100 years. Alright, so a bit of a side note. I have a theory about the Shrine of Resurrection. The Shrine of Resurrection would be pretty pointless to the Sheikah people if it took 100 years to heal someone from their wounds. And if you ask me, Link can take a lot of damage in the game before he dies. So unless you're telling me this is what multiple direct hits from the Guardians look like, I don't believe he was about to die. No, I think he fainted. Which would make sense if you had run halfway across the nation fighting your way the entire time. Here's my theory of what I think happened. Alright, so the ninjas run in there, and the runes are sliding down saying, set timer to recover, 1 minute. Set time to heal, 5 minutes. Time to fully heal, 1 hour. But the ninjas, or whatever they're called, are looking at this just going, well, what the frick, man, I don't know what that means, I can't read those runes. So they just grab the dial and like crank it up to the max. The Sheikah runes start going and saying things like, dude, he will be fully healed in an hour. You do realize you'd be putting him in stasis 100 years and will destroy his mind, right? You can just come back in 2 hours and he'll be fine with all of his memories. Just come back in a couple minutes. Then the ninjas just stare blankly at the runes, and they still don't know what it's saying. As the shrine goes, then they just leave, as the shrine just goes, well, WTF, man. I guess I'll follow my orders. I'll keep him in stasis for an extra 99 years that he doesn't need. Anyway, my theory is that it didn't actually take 100 years to heal Link. The timer was just misset or broken on the shrine. I also say broken because, you know, it was 9,900 years old when he was put into the shrine. So it, you know, might not have been working the best. Anyway, back to the recap. With the chosen knight fallen, and the 4 champions dead, guardians flowed forth from the 4 massive pillars that had sprouted surrounding Hyrule Castle. The city surrounding the castle was leveled. The armies and soldiers of Hyrule could do nothing to stop the oncoming tide. Even the country's most important and powerful fort fell. Every village on or by Hyrule Field was wiped out. The Hylians themselves were almost killed off. Only the villages that were remote or hard to reach survived. But the kingdom of Hyrule died along with its final king, Roman Bosporus. Link wakes up from his 100-year slumber, where he must begin to rebuild his power and memories. Depending on what the player chooses, Link slowly remembers his past by traveling around the destroyed kingdom. He frees the 4 divine beasts and their champions trapped within. Along his travels across Hyrule, Link completes puzzles and grows his power, until finally he storms Hyrule Castle, defeats Calamity Ganon, and at last Link and Zelda seal away the dark beast that is Ganon, and the kingdom of Hyrule can finally begin to rebuild. I was a very driven kid. I spent most of my teenage years working on various projects and a bunch of different things and books and all of this, and whenever I finished one of them, my first thought wasn't relief that I'd done it or being proud of myself. It was always, what's next? What else is there to do? And this is how I felt about everything I've ever worked on. And it's both a blessing and a curse. I have a naturally addictive personality, which means I can get sucked into things very easily and then find it very hard to stop. Even now, I wrote this script in just 2 days. I need to finish what I start. The things I work on and the things I do help drive me. It not only drives me to finish projects, but to keep working on even more projects. Working makes me want to work more. I know it might sound odd, but the only times that I end up with things like writer's block is when I stop writing. This drive to discover and keep pushing into a personal unknown is what connected me so much with Breath of the Wild. I know what it is like to be a kid struggling to meet the expectations set on them by both other people, and more importantly by yourself. I understand the stress of feeling like you can't speak about what is stressing you out in the first place. I know what it is like. I know what it is like to feel like you worked your hardest, to try and keep failing your way forward, but yet in the end it doesn't feel like it was just good enough. Breath of the Wild also holds another special place in my heart. Breath of the Wild was one of the first games I ever played, and I played it for the first time in my late teenage years. Growing up and as a teenager, I just wasn't that interested in video games. The games I played before Breath of the Wild were LEGO games and others like it. I enjoyed them, but I didn't spend hours a day playing them. I just saw them as something mildly entertaining. Breath of the Wild was the first game that I ever wanted to put hours into playing. It was the first ever game that I played that I was disappointed when I had to stop playing it. In other words, Breath of the Wild was the first ever game that I played for the sake of playing it. Before this game, I only ever played video games with friends or family, neither of which happened that often, and as a distraction from other things in my life. As a kid, when I heard about people staying up all night to play video games or spend hours playing games, I didn't get it. I honestly didn't. I got bored eventually of any game I had ever played. They were never worth spending hours a day playing. Even Wind Waker, the first Zelda game I ever played, I only played a couple times a week just because it didn't interest me all that much. Breath of the Wild not only made me want to play Breath of the Wild, but it made me want to play other games more, because I wanted to experience more of what Breath of the Wild had to offer. So I looked for other games that were like it, and I have yet to find anything like it. I have played many games after Breath of the Wild that I have loved. All the games that I played for the first time after playing Breath of the Wild include the BioShock trilogy, Outer Worlds, Ash, and Hollow Knight, and most recently a new game called Eastward. But not a single one has made me care as much as Breath of the Wild has, and that is a magic I still don't entirely understand. The only reason I have found that I felt so deeply connected with the story and themes of this game is I constantly feel like I am a failure, and it drives me to work harder and be better, and honestly some days it doesn't feel like it's enough. But Breath of the Wild made me feel like that might be okay. It took Link 100 years to wake up, because he failed. He failed so badly that his entire kingdom, and the king that he sworn to serve, died while he was asleep. While the princess he was charged to protect fought what amounts to death itself alone, if you are to believe the game. So, he failed. He just screwed up. But when he wakes up, he and you as the player keep trying. As a new player to Breath of the Wild will tell you, you die and fail constantly. But you keep playing, you keep going, because the world is so much bigger than that. You just want to see more of it. The thing that above all, that I took away from Breath of the Wild was that it was important to remember and mourn the past, that you have to accept where and why you failed, but you can't stop there. You have to keep pushing forward, you have to keep going no matter what. No matter your failures and how bad you may have come up short, you have to keep fighting even if your entire kingdom fails. Even if you fail in your duty, you keep fighting. And eventually if you keep going, if you keep fighting, you just might succeed. The price of success in Breath of the Wild is high. The price of defeating Calamity Ganon was Hyrule itself. It was the death of all of its leaders, of friends, of daughters. But they succeeded. Link and Zelda succeeded in the end, even if it cost everything and 100 years of time. Hope prevailed above all, and at the end, hope and determination saved the kingdom. So, what do I do about it now, and why I can't let go? As I said, the game is about pushing forward. It is about acknowledging the past and going forward. I have been playing this game for 3 years. I finished the DLC and main game and all 120 shrines twice. I have never been insane enough to go for all of the Koroks, but overall I have poured a disturbing number of hours into this game, and I am not sure how to stop, or if I even really want to. In the end, I made this video for one very specific reason, and it was to let go. I've spent the last 3 years thinking about this game, and I know that makes me sad and pathetic, but it is the truth. I don't want to let go of this game. I wish I could revisit the game every single year, and it would be like the first time I had played it. But I can't. I look at Breath of the Wild as the first true game I actually played. I started with what many people have called the greatest game ever made. This was my entry point into, for lack of a better word, gaming as a whole. I started at the top with a fantastic game that I personally connected with, and now no other game has ever been able to measure up. I've enjoyed lots of games after Breath of the Wild, but none has ever been as good. None has ever measured up. Except maybe Hollow Knight, but Hollow Knight deserves its own entire separate video to talk about that. I've played lots of games where I've enjoyed their gameplay. Call of Juarez has excellent gameplay. It is deeply entertaining and it is enjoyable to play. It has sick gameplay and has good controls driven by an interesting and tight narrative. But I didn't feel anything when I played this game. I would recommend this game to anyone who is just looking to have a good time and a good distraction, but it doesn't make you feel anything. After I finished playing this game, I forgot about it almost as quickly as I had finished it. Or take a recent game like Eastward. I loved this game. I don't want to, and I won't spoil it, but just know it has a very good story, and it is the first piece of media in a long while that has made me want to cry at the end. I connected very deeply with the story of the game, but its gameplay is a little subpar. It is not very hard, and it tries to be a puzzle game, but the puzzles aren't complicated. The story, though, is heartbreaking and lovely. Now, back to Breath of the Wild. That is the only game I have ever played thus far that has perfectly straggled that line between the two mediums. The game flawlessly encourages its players to explore and engage with the world, and it tells that story through the exploration and gameplay. No other game I have ever played has done that as well for me as Breath of the Wild. So, how do I move on? If nothing else will ever be as good, what is even the point of moving on? This is the question I have been asking myself for 3 years, and it took me a long time to figure it out. But making this video has let me figure it out. How to move on is told to us by the game itself. You just keep going forward. I let go of the game. I let go of the story not because I want to, but because I have to. Because it is unhealthy to spend so much time focused on one game that is built around adventure. The kingdom was saved. You may have shown up to the party 100 years late, but you still made it, and it is time to start on a new adventure. So, farewell, Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. It has been far too long of a ride, and thank you. If you watch this video till the end, thank you so much. This is a new type of video I will be working on for at least a while. For the most part, this type of video will be looking at why I liked certain things. There are a couple of video game ones planned, a couple for TV shows, a couple for movies, and a few for books. The next upcoming one is about Hilda, or an episode of the new Star Wars show that was pretty sick. So, one of those two. Guess we'll see which one it is, but if you liked this video, you have that to look forward to in the future. If you didn't like it, I'm sorry, I guess. I'm not sure what else I would have done. Anyway, good night, good luck, and don't get lost.